Hello and welcome to the first edition of our fashion talks at AUP 2021, and our series this year is entitled Between Despair and Hope. We're thrilled to welcome Giulia Mensitieri this evening with us for our inaugural talk. My name is Renate Stauss. I'm a fashion studies professor here at the American University of Paris, and together with Sophie Kurkdjian, I organized this series of talks that I'll pass over to Sophie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being there. I'm Sophie Kurkdjian. I'm a fashion studies professor at AUP, and I teach fashion studies with Renate. And I'm very happy to welcome you, Giulia, for this first fashion talk of the year. Thank you very much.
So before we pass the word over to Giulia, I just wanted to introduce you to the series fashion talks at AUP and this year's theme, Between Despair and Hope. So Sophie and I, who are organizing this series, we thought that those two words, hope and despair, are very apt as descriptors for fashion this year. So hope and despair are marking fashion and as an industry in particular. So the oscillating movement in space between despair and hope seemed very right to explore fashion this year, those wearing and making it. The fashion industry in many parts is in despair, and we're going to hear more about this today. In the summer, a figure emerged that about 75% of independent labels in the UK are predicted not to see the other side of COVID. At the same time, we've seen the last few months that need has rendered creative and collaborative and new ways of making, of showing, of selling and wearing fashion have emerged. The Business of Fashion published their State of Fashion report this year, this week, 2 days ago, the State of Fashion 2021. And in it, they argue that the industry has suffered its worst year on record, with almost 3/4 of listed companies losing money. And they predict that fashion companies will post approximately a 90% decline in economic profit in 2020. So these are dramatic figures, but they are most dramatically felt in the global south by those making the garments. So more than an economic crisis for the fashion industry, COVID-19 has really resulted in a global humanitarian crisis, also for millions of garment workers whose livelihoods are endangered. According to the report of the Workers' Rights Consortium published in November of this year, nearly 40% of garment workers have lost their jobs in the last 2 months, and the remaining 60% are earning significantly less. So the precarious conditions of fashion labor, also in the global West, is our subject today, this evening, with Giulia and her book. So between despair and hope, at the same time, we feel that fashion is a vehicle for hope. The great connective and creative potential of fashion is a vehicle for hope. And Giulia covers both despair and hope in her book. And I'm so happy that you're here tonight. And Sophie will briefly introduce you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, so Giulia, you have a PhD in social anthropology and ethnology. You defended your thesis in 2016 at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. And your thesis was entitled La chance d'être là, le travail dans la mode entre glamour et précarité. And then you published the book after your PhD, first in French, Le plus beau métier du monde. And more recently, this book has been translated into English. In general, your research focused on globalization, on the transformation of work, and the desirable imaginaries produced by contemporary capitalism. And I'm very happy to have you there because, of course, of your book and your research, but also, and this is something we discussed briefly before the conference, also because you can talk with students and you can talk with them about the fashion industry, but also the fashion labor, and you can talk about the places where maybe they will work. And I think it's very nice to have this possibility to talk about concrete experiences, concrete internship, concrete jobs, and to have the opportunity to talk with you is very, very important for them. So thank you very much. And I will let you present your book and your research.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. I am very, very pleased to be here. Thank you to Renate and to Sophie for this invitation. First of all, I would like to spend actually a few words on the anthropology that I practice, which is linked with what Renate was saying. By anthropology, I mean the global understanding of the human being in all its relation to the others and to the world around him, whether living, material, immaterial, or spatial. Anthropological understanding is based on direct participatory observation called ethnography. This is what I did in the fashion industry. And the idea is just to go into a new world that we don't know yet, and to understand its language, its structure of power, how this world functions. So there is only one anthropology, which is the same as one studies supposedly distant people, so-called traditional societies. In the case of fashion, we can think about all the production that is outsources and all the cultural dimension, economic dimension, structure of power that are far of our Western centers of production. And it can be also an anthropology carried out in the street, here in the city where you are, where I am, in the professional world in which we are. So what is important in the anthropological perspective is not the field itself, but is the posture, which is the posture of a professional stranger, to quote Michael Lager, anthropologist. Is this idea that we, as a stranger, we can be welcome in a new world, community, society, space, whatever. We understand the rule, we learn the language, but we have always this distance that allow us to deconstruct, to criticize, and perhaps, and this is the case of this conference, maybe to find alternatives. And this is very important because what I did is to put myself into something that is everywhere and that we have the impression to understand and to know, which is the fashion industry, because fashion industry is, as we will see after more in detail, something that is impossible to avoid. Okay, we are all concerned in a way or in another with fashion product, but also fashion images, representation, and so on and so on. So as a political anthropologist of the globalization, I decided to study fashion because it's a total social fact. Is both a global and ramified industry, is a system of sign, is a cultural product, is a social word, is a professional word, is a word of production, of consumption, of production of material good, of imaginaries, and of course a sector of education. So for me, it's a privileged field, an important field, I would say also an urgent field to understand capitalism at large and to change it, since we need it. We are seeing it through this global crisis, that we don't only need to understand it, but to change it. But to change it, we need to understand it. So for this book, I was intended to investigate the transformation of work and the nature of work, the meaning of work, given to work in contemporary capitalism, as well as the spread of precariousness within population symbolically and socially valorized. Yet fashion is the ideal field to address this question because it is the world of great luxury, is a global industry, symbolically and economically very powerful, as you know, presenting, as we will see, a diffuse, precarious work. So for me, fashion is not an object in itself, but is the field through which I analyze capitalism and its transformation. And I mean, it's a word in which we can see the most important aspect of contemporary capitalism, which are for me the interconnection between material and immaterial production. We have both of them, and we need both of them, as well as the spread of inequalities, of domination, and inequalities on distribution of wealth. When we think about precariousness in the fashion industry, we always think about outsourced work. We think about factory in Bangladesh or factory in Africa. But what I will show you today is another form of precariousness, which is as well useful to fashion economies, and which is a more hidden one. And since the title of this cycle of conferences that I have the honor to open is Fashion Between Despair and Hope, I will follow the line by presenting my work through other oxymorons, which are overexposure and opacities, prestige and precariousness, and self-fulfillment and self-exploitation. I hope that we will have the time to go through all of them, but it's important just to mention and to let your mind work already. A few concrete elements about my investigation. So I did an ethnographic work. I spent more than 2 years following Mia, which has been the crucial person we will speak about later, that took me by the hand and introduced me in this word, which is she's a stylist, a fashion stylist. I've been following her in her private life and professional life, in photo shoots, défilé, fashion shows, and so on. But I've also been living with her, sharing her flat in Paris. We will talk about it later. By the connection that I made, I met many other professionals that I've been following, interviewing, and I also did an internship with an independent fashion designer in Brussels. So my fieldwork was physically based in Paris and in Brussels, but since creative work, because I was interested in creative work about this very peculiar, critical idea of creativity, creative workers of fashion are global. They are one day in London, the day after in New York. So any kind of investigation related to a fashion creative worker is an investigation also on global circulation of people, of ideas, of images, of goods, and so on and so on. Before to go more in depth into the oxymoron, I have to introduce a notion that has been crucial in my work and that is still crucial, which is the notion of dream, which is a kind of red line, I would say, in the research I carried out and I still carry out, because this idea that fashion is a dream, that fashion makes people dream, has emerged constantly and transversally through the investigation, despite the heterogeneity of my interlocutor. The notion of dream is used in fashion by worker, by consumer, by fashion studies, fashion literature, as well by media. It's something that you can find and you will find everywhere. So this analogy between fashion and the dream can be explained historically to me, and this is what I did actually in my book, and very synthetically, to me, from the 80s, with the consolidation of neoliberal capitalism, fashion gained a central place in the media and in the global imaginaries. The lives of top model, of designer and stylists start to be mediatized, and fashion, through the idea of brand, expands its production on a global scale and sizes many spheres of consumption and many aspects of our lives. At the same time, a decade later, I would say, in the 90s, fashion became also a place, an aspirational labor perspective. So in the 90s, and Angela McRobbie wrote about it, in the 90s, with the disindustrialization of the West, okay, with the delocalization of production, Western society had to invest in something immaterial, and creativity became the crucial word of the new policies and politics discourse. And it is in this very moment that fashion schools start to spread around, and the fashion become not only a dream of consumption and of transformation of the self, but also a dream professional word. Okay, so this was a big picture. Now we can go to meet the first oxymoron, which is overexposure and opacities. Despite this idea of dream coming out in all my interview, in all the texts I read, and so on, the research, the book, the research that I present in the book has shown that the professional reality that fashion produces are not always in keeping with the imaginary of the dream. It is for this reason that rather than being a word brought to light, fashion to me is an overexposed word. In photography, overexposure refers to the excessive exposure to light, which results in images whose shades, shadows, contours, and contour slope are vague, imprecise, and sometimes invisible. The metaphor of overexposure is useful because it makes it possible to point both the attractiveness of the dream that fashion sells by its constant highlighting, also in professional terms, and we have a lot of representation now through Instagram and so on of behind the curtains, under the scene of fashion production, which are actually an aesthetization of fashion labor. We can speak about it later. So it shows, overexposure show at the same time the attractiveness, but also its opacity, the impossibility of seeing the reality under these imaginaries, rendered invisible by the too visible. We have too much light, fashion is everywhere, fashion images in every kind of media, magazine, street of the world, television, shops, and whatever. It's everywhere, yet this mass of information is hiding what's going on behind. And this is exactly where I went, behind those images and imaginaries, to see how they are produced. But overexposure, it's also the dream of fashion that is projected on the workers, creative workers. We are in Paris, we are in Brussels, we are in London, okay? We are in immaterial production with designer, photographer, models, intern, hairstylist, makeup artist, journalist. Those are the people I've been involved with during my research. All the professional figures that were not directly involved with the materiality of the production, okay? No factories, not the material production, I would say. This separation is a little bit artificial, but it's how I make it simple in a way. because materiality and immateriality are always linked. It's overexposure is the dream that is projected on the worker, the reflection of the light of fashion covering those who operate in this industry and giving them a desirable place in society. Worker in this sector, creative worker in this sector, enjoy a desired and desirable social position, which places them in the sphere of symbolic elites. So, let's share something about working in the creative side of the fashion industry. Fashion is based on an apparently paradoxical rule. The works symbolically rewarding and allowing to accumulate prestige are, for the most, not very or not at all remunerated in money. Whereas the work well paid are compromising for the career. Remember that we have to see after this pandemic crisis that in France, for example, in fashion industry, one most powerful industry in terms of money, okay? After oil and before arms and car. So it's an industry that has a lot of money. Despite this fact, we have a diffusion and a dissemination of precarious and unpaid work. People work for free. We will see it. So the symbolic and material economics of fashion are divided into circuits of value, to quote a sociologist, Viviana Zelizer. The editorial artistic, the edgy one, the avant-garde one, I would say, and the commercial. I will give you some more concrete example. When you open a fashion magazine and you see what we call an editorial, a reportage, a story, it's not an advertisement, it's not a campaign of a product, okay? But when you see a story, also for a magazine as Vogue, which is the Bible of fashion, in the word of my interlocutor, you can be sure that nobody is paid to produce those images. Nobody is paid. Nor the photographer, nor the model, nor the intern, the makeup artist. Everyone is working for free. To be more precise, is working for something else than money, which is visibility and accumulation of prestige and hope, I would say, to arrive at one place at one moment in their career. It's the same if you take an edgy magazine. I don't want to mention them, but in your mind you can think about the most edgy, the most avant-garde fashion magazine that are an important tool of work also for fashion worker. You can be sure that nobody is paid to make them. A model that is running for haute couture défilé in Paris is not paid. Or it will be paid only a few, something like 200 euros, something like that. So a gig, I would say, a job is symbolically valuated, less it will be paid. On the contrary, to do a catalog, for example, for a commercial brand, a brand that do not has glamour in the internal economies of fashion, is something that will be very well paid in terms of money, but could really stop your career in the fashion industry. It's like a kind of blame, I would say. Okay, so for instance, to give you an example, Mia, the stylist I've been following, in order to earn money, she was working for a commercial, doing advertising for, let's say, a washing machine, but she was signing that with a pseudonymous, not her real name. in order to not compromise a career. And you have a lot of fashion workers that are doing that, which is not possible if you are a model of work, because you work with your body. Your body is your tool, so you can change your name, but your body is your body. So fashion model is something really really emblematic to me, and we can speak about it later if you want. Extremely emblematic about this articulation between the desirable image of the fashion work and the reality of production, because it's really not a desirable profession when you see how it works concretely. So fashion is thus governed by a split between monetary value and the symbolic value of work, and by an apparent denial of economy, to say it in Bourdieu's term, despite the fact that fashion is an industry dedicated to profit. The ultimate goal of the fashion industry is to produce money. So fashion workers must, in the construction of their career, compose with this double economy. This is what I call the rule of the game, which is summed up as follows: more prestige, less money; more money, less prestige. Now, what does it mean in the lives of fashion workers to live and to compose with this double economy? We arrive at the second oxymoron, which is prestige and precariousness. The prestige is the social prestige coming from being there in this desirable and overexposed world that is fashion. And is also the prestige given by the practice of creative labor. Being creative, being a creative worker in the fashion industry is highly valued in a different way inside and outside the fashion social world. But still, if you say, and maybe some of the students that are here with us tonight experience that, if you say, I study fashion, I work in fashion, and if you mention some brand, you can see the light in the eyes of your interlocutor. It's the dream that is projects on you. And the precariousness is related to the structural condition of work in fashion, which is often precarious, poorly paid, or rewarded in prestige, or paid in luxury goods, such clothes, bags, perfume, makeup, but those items do not fill your frigidaire and do not pay your rent, I would say. So to come back to the rule of the game: more prestige, less money; more money, less prestige. What kind of existence does the application of this rule produce in worker lives? How in their everyday life the luxury universe workers produce through their profession, and in which they circulate to their work, okay, being in a 4-star hotel, being on a fashion show, being in a prestigious boutique, prestigious building, coexist with the precariousness that is the opaque part of their lives. I will come back to example of Mia. She's a stylist, she's a kind of director of photo images, and at the moment I met her, I speak in ethnographic present, as we say, but she's still a stylist. She's represented by one of the most prestigious global agencies for creative fashion work. She worked for editorial publication and for major luxury brands as well. As I said, she signed her commercial services with the pseudonymous. Her life is perpetually in movement, take place between 4-star hotels all over the world and her room in a 2-room flat in La Chapelle. For the one who are in Paris, they know that La Chapelle is, of course, gentrified as all the places in Paris, but still a popular neighborhood. And she shared a flat with Jaime, which is an architect, And actually, she sleeps in the kitchen behind a screen. She has a bed in the kitchen behind the screen because she's not able to pay a rent properly. So she has a deal with this friend. And when I saw her the first time, it's an emblematic situation of her condition. She was wearing a lot of luxury items. She had a lot of money on her, I would say, through the clothes. But she were actually fighting on the phone with the telephone company because they were going to cut her phone since she hadn't paid the bill. She had no money to pay the bill or her phone. And she asked to a friend to pay her a beer because she literally had no penny in her pockets. Okay? And she was coming back from a trip in New York where she stayed in a palace, and she were traveling in business class with Prada shoes, Chanel bag, and so on and so on. And her situation is not at all an exception. It's actually completely the norm, I would say, of a creative fashion worker. Yet, despite her hidden and opaque precariousness, Mia, as all the other fashion workers, benefits from the social point of view of the overexposure of fashion. Through her appearance, through her aesthetic capital. When she walks in the streets, you can never imagine the opaque side of her lives, the space, the geographies, the material world of the opaque side of her lives, which is eating at McDonald's, doing errands at Lidl, and so on and so on, not being able to go to the doctor, and so on and so on. So this overexposure, this dream dissimulates the precariousness, which is hidden by the dream of fashion. So the precariousness in fashion is, for me, what I call a precariousness of the in-between, between two symbolic universes, the one of luxury, visible and overexposed, and the one of precariousness, rendered opaque or dissimulated. Fashion creative workers live in between two social conditions, the one of the symbolic elite generating desire and that of economic, professional, and existential precariousness, and between two nature, two circuits of commerce, the artistic independent, editorial, and the commercial. So we have really this double dimension, which is structurally related to the double nature of fashion, which is both a cultural product, a cultural industry, and an industry which vocation is to make money. So why do workers accept to work under this condition and accept? We don't have the time to go on into the kind of a relation, interpersonal relation that are typical of the fashion professional work, which are actually relation of exploitation is a word that I use, and I do think that is important to decline the meaning of exploitation, because of course it's not the same exploitation of worker in Bangladesh. Exploitation of creative worker is a luxury. You have to be able to work for free. It means that at one point in your life, you know that you will eat, that your rent will be paid by your parents, by your friends, or I don't know. So it's a privilege in a certain way, but it's still exploitation for the very simple reason that at one point, somebody is making profit on your work. And this exploitation, it contributes also to the inequalities of the fashion industry, to its richness, as well as, I would say, to inequalities of capitalism at large. We arrive to the third oxymoron. Do I still have time? Stop me if I don't. Yes? I can go through it?
Yes, I would say maybe 5 minutes, and then we
Yes.
have 20 minutes for questions. Thank
Great.
you, Julia.
You're welcome. So the third oxymoron is self-fulfillment and self-exploitation. Why people accept to work for free? Why? I should address this question to the worker to come that are listening in this presentation. Because, of course, working in fashion is also a source of a form of fulfillment, of pleasure, linked to passion, linked to creativity, linked to self-expression, to the possibility of evaluating and existing in a desirable world, but also in a world in which, and this is very important, to the world who is actually producing the desire to come. There is a kind of magic being in the fashion, and those desire for me, and we can discuss it later, are the central, crucial aspect. If we want to change the world we live in, we have to change the desire we have, and fashion is the place where we can do that. Parenthesis. So fashion is a source of self-expression, of fulfillment. Also, in fashion, the domination endured within the professional world can be capitalized and transformed in form of prestige. A prestige making fashion worker admired and desirable for those who are not part of this dream. Okay, is the gaze from outside that make those kind of inequalities and domination that render them affordable, I would say. Fashion creative worker produce the glamour, and glamour is very interesting to go back to the etymology of this word, which actually means magic spell and the power through the image and through the appearances. So fashion workers not only produce the glamour, but they also embody this glamour, which make them a symbolic elite despite their unfavorable professional and economic realities. So to understand the work in fashion and creative work in fashion, it is fundamental to hold together the domination, the precariousness, with the power of the appearance and the notion of glamour allow to do has. So to conclude this aspect is the conjunction of appearance and power at the same time, a power both performed and endured by fashion worker, which makes the fashion world the world of glamour labor. To conclude, in general, I asked myself in my research, is fashion really a dream in the sense, is fashion really an exceptional word? Is fashion a word exceptional? I mean, out of the norm, out of the ordinary. And if we look at it from a very materialistic perspective, I will ask you, can we really think about one of the most powerful industry, economically speaking, symbolically speaking, of contemporary capitalism, an industry that involves, the statistics says, 6% of global consumption. We estimate that on 10 workers in the world of all kind of production, 3 of them work in a way or another for the fashion industry. Can we really think about this space as an exception? To me, it's not an exception, it's more, I would say, an emblem, a kind of yes, it's an emblematic space of contemporary capitalism. And that's why I do think that we have to take it extremely seriously And this is what you are doing through your studies in fashion studies. And I encourage you to take it extremely seriously, because it's only by deconstructing the area of exception that surrounded the fashion world and fashion work in general that we can suggest new kind of desire, new kind of structure, new kind of social relation, global relation, and a more equal, I hope, world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Giulia. First of all, I would like to ask you to open up your microphones for a round of applause for this enticing talk. Thank you.
Magnifique.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I've been I had a look, and I think your talk was too exciting for people to write in the chat at the same time. So what I would suggest I know the students who've joined us from within AUP, you can use the raise hand sign for the questions. I think the others, you can try, if it doesn't work, put your name in the chat and we can call you out. And we can also try a little bit of open microphone, but we're 32 people in the meeting, so there might be some overlay. I will start the first question. I have many, but I just pose one and then give over to somebody else. So what I find fascinating in your work, this notion of dream, and essentially what you're doing is debunking the dream. You're unpacking the dream, which, you know, isn't something which is really welcome. So I'm wondering about reactions during your research, but also after its publication, which in a way plays out this conflict of you debunking the dream, which is really to be upheld.
Yes, thank you for your question. It's a very interesting one, because actually, even if you debunk the dream is still there, and this is the power of fashion. And it's extremely interesting to see that fashion workers actually are aware of what's going on. They are not aware before to enter in the industry. They often enter in the industry because I have many interviews in which they say to me, I get involved in fashion because, you know, I was dreaming through fashion magazine, beauty, and so on and so on. And then they enter, and this dream is partially destroyed, but not totally. And this is the power of this industry, is that it's not because you know and you are aware about it that you stop, you know, having this kind of excitement, adrenaline. So, and this is why I still studied in anthropological term. Is very interesting to study this kind of magic, because we are used to think that you know, people are not aware, they are stupid, superficial, and so on and so on. It's not like that. Fashion workers are aware about that. And it's more complicated than that. I think that the power of my research and of the book that actually has been surprisingly very well received by fashion workers because of opening a space on the opacity. It's very hard for fashion worker to embody, to charge all the heaviness of precariousness, you know? This performance of the dream is also an interpersonal performance. Also between friends, colleagues, there is this idea that you have always to show the glamorous sides of your life. And to open this space was very cathartical for them from a very subjective point of view. But the strength of the research, and this I saw it with the book, is that actually you cannot imagine how many mails, testimonial of fashion workers from the very bottom until the very, very high sphere of the fashion industry wrote to me to tell me, you said what is actually nobody said, but I had the impression to read my diary, my personal diary, and the power of the research and the power of anthropology, I would say, of social sciences, and in this peculiar case, that the person understood that what they experiences as an individual experience, as an interpersonal experience with the bossy boss, with an equal relation on their own specific professional situation, is actually a structural and systematic structure of domination, and they are part of a chain. So this was the feedback that I had, that people were they realized that actually is systemic, is not interpersonal. You understand what I mean? And this is the first step to change things and to understand that they are connected with the embroiderer in India, and they are connected with the interns, and they are connected with the student, and they are connected with the farmers of cotton in India, and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I answered to your question, but yes, despite this, the dream is still there.
Mm-hmm. And if let's say this can be called a little bit of a Me Too moment in the fashion industry, did you have any feedback of change, of people taking steps to change the situation, being encouraged by what they read because it's a shared situation rather than an individualized situation?
I think that the book help people that were already in the process of deconstructing. Concrete change, I don't know. We need to see in the time. We also have to say that people that are exploited, and this is not in all professional sector, they are also under pressure and they do not have the time to think about alternatives. So this is something that is also systemic and it's complicated. I do think that in order to have change, we need collective action. I don't think that individually things can change, because of course there are people that said, okay, I don't want to work in fashion anymore. So this is an individual change. They change, actually. They quit, they left, but there are hundreds behind them that are disposed to do anything to be exploited, to work for free. So I don't think that big change will happen individually. I do think that it can be, but it has to be a collective process. And there is still a lot of scare. People are scared to speak up a lot. And I can see it because I work with the Model Law, which is an NGO, that's the French NGO that is trying to regulate labor in fashion, model work in fashion. And I can see how difficult it is, even if we guarantee to stay anonymous, to speak in fashion. There is this idea of secret, and also of pressure, of I'm not allowed to say things. Also the charisma of the main figure of the fashion brand, the aura of the brand itself, which is a fetishism. I mean, so it's difficult. It happens, but I do think that we need more collective steps.
Thank you. I don't see any raised hands at the moment. This might be Teams, which is what sometimes happens. So if you do have a question, please open your microphone. Linnea, you have a question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Renate. I'm an undergraduate student with a major in global communications and a minor in fashion studies, and I've had the pleasure to take both Renate and Sophie's classes. But I was just wondering, in the wake of the pandemic and digital fashion presentations specifically, that kind of dream that you've been talking about has kind of disappeared in terms of the presentations all being on the same playing field, essentially. New designers are presenting online, Dior is presenting online. Does this kind of, I felt that is like kind of, wait, let me rephrase that. Has these digital presentations allowed for less imitation of luxury fashion houses? Are younger designers still wanting to imitate that dream of luxury fashion, or are they attempting to go in a different direction because of the shift to digital?
Okay, thank you for your question. I don't think we can say yes or no. I think we have two directions. And it's complicated because particularly the luxury industry, you can change maybe the process of presentation, the production of the imaginaries, which is actually, the fuel of this industry. But there is all the materiality of the production process of luxury goods in Paris. I'm speaking about big maison de couture, which is a very old school kind of production. So you have always, particularly in haute couture and in luxury, this articulation between we are producing something new, we are producing new images, new ways of doing, new ways of presenting, new dream, new bodies, and so on and so on. And then the materiality of the production, which is, a tailoristic factory that haven't changed since I don't know how many, and Sophie is an historian. I do think I can't answer because as an anthropologist, I do long-term research. So I can tell you the tendencies that I can see, but I don't have yet a proper answer. I do think that this crisis is an opportunity, of course, as all crises. Crisis, the etymology of the word means separation, means discernment. We divide in order to choose. So a crisis is always a possibility to let something behind and to go towards something new. But I also do think that from a very anthropological point of view of the social world of fashion worker, that's all the person that we are used to see on a défilé, on the show, they need this social moment of prestige, of connection. They need to be there, to be seen, to see others. And I understand it. As teacher, we also need to see you students physically, and you need to see us. So yes, digitalization is something, but it will not change everything to me.
Thank you.
I hope that I answered to your questions.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I saw, Brooke, do you want to ask a question? I saw your hand.
Yes. Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is, how do you think the fashion industry will continue to create this dream or glamorous narrative through the parameters of sustainability?
Okay, this is the question that I would like addressed to you, new generation, because you have this responsibility, which is an enormous responsibility, and that's why working in fashion is crucial. As I said, I do think that there is a deep work to do in order to change what is desirable, to change what is the dream, to really change the component of it. For now, we are still, and crisis is also the moment in which inequality grows, and there are people that are making a lot of money now, and they need to show off their status. So crisis could be also a moment in which luxury dream, fashion dream become more and more luxurious, unequal, and so on and so on. But it can also be a moment in which, through social media, I do think media at large have a tremendous responsibility to transform the dream, and also to, you know, there is this idea of alienation. We are all alienated in the sense of it's very difficult when we see something that is desirable to really pay attention and to do the effort to think what is behind that. Who made the thing that we have in the hand? How this prize is possible? How many hands? How many kilometers? How many workers? How many ideas are involved? Are those things affordable for everyone involved? I do think that we really need to make a collective exercise to think about the trajectory of the thing we have around us. And I do think that we have to transform the idea of something luxurious is really making me better, beautifuler, powerfuler, to wear something that is, you know, full of exploitation in his trajectory as an object. I do think that we have to change that, as we have to change the, you know, gender inequalities that fashion is still promoting, and race inequalities. I do think that there is a lot of thing to do. Is not going to be resolved like that, but on a long term, I do think that we can change the desire of what is a dream.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? You can open your microphones because we don't see everybody's hand here.
Yes, I see one hand.
Philip.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Philip. I'm a fashion tutor, and I wanted to thank you so much for your talk and also your book, which I enjoyed tremendously reading. And I've been studying and working like in the 90s in a fashion school, very well-known fashion school in Belgium, and also working in the fashion industry for many years. And reading your book also really felt like this personal diary of a fashion worker. I really experienced. I went through my whole experiences as a student, as a free worker, as an intern, working for free in fashion, various fashion companies, and I'm always wondering how or seeing how old-fashioned actually the fashion industry is. You know, like I'm always surprised how there's certain aristocratic society is still surviving in this industry. It's unbelievable. Because could you comment on also how the people that are in power are actually from old families? I always have this impression that it's very old-fashioned, the fashion industry, isn't it?
Totally. Thank you for your comment. Yes, it's again this paradoxical coexistence between this idea of producing always something new and then something extremely old school in many terms, in terms of production, in terms of social relations. And if you look at the person that are really have power in fashion, actually, we are in a system of la cour. I don't know how do you say it in English, the courts, and you have the king, and then you have the aristocracy, and you know. And again, this is also related to the precariousness that I described, because as I mentioned, it's a privilege to work for free, and in order to arrive to the real position in fashion, which, I mean, there are people that are earning a lot of money actually in fashion. Not everyone is working for free, but in order to arrive there, you have to accumulate all these unpaid yet prestigious experiences. And in order to do that, you need money. I mean, you need a certain social situation, a certain connection. You need economic status. You need all the things. So paradoxically, being exploited in the fashion creative industry, it's a privilege, and this is highly problematic, because fashion industry is reproducing, despite the fact that there is all this rhetoric, no, that you just need to have talent to be welcome in the fashion industry, to drop in. This is something that everyone told me. No, we don't look about sexual preferences, gender, race. If you have talent, you are welcome. This is true, but who last in the fashion industry? Who stay? Who remain? Who arrive? Because most of the people I've been interviewing, actually, they are out of the fashion industry, because they could not afford anymore to work for free, and so on and so on. So this is something that we are also reproducing in fashion school. And it's something heavy to say, but we have to be aware about that. And it's important to know as students that, of course, you have to do internship, and it's important to do internship as part of your education. And after that, maybe you will have the opportunity to do another or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 amazing internship. But you have to think that you can do that, but maybe there is somebody else that has as much talent as you have, as much motivation, but has not the economic situation to do that. And here is where actually we reproduce also those kind of inequalities.
Thank you. I have another question. And I'm wondering, because you originally wrote the book probably now 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, the original edition. And since then, much has happened in terms of the, social equality movement, in terms of a discourse of decolonizing fashion industry, fashion studies, etc. And there's a discourse that that suggests that we should think about more than one fashion system. That by keeping to talk about one fashion system, we uphold a kind of imperialistic fashion system. By talking about one fashion industry, we move our perspective away from the many different local fashion industries there exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, almost 2 years after you originally published this, if you were to revisit your analysis today, could you imagine opening it up?
Thank you. It's a crucial question. This is something I want to do, and actually I have the project to do. But I don't think it's in opposition with what I did, because I have a materialistic approach in my study of the fashion industry. And I do think that as I said, my idea is not to crystallize something and to say it is like that, but is to analyze capitalism through fashion. And I do think that as anthropologists, as scholars, we have to have this professional stranger gaze on the center of power. And the center, I mean, there is a fashion system in materialistic term where the money is and where the power is built and where, the imaginaries that are spread globally all over the world is made and is produced. And this is what I've been studied from my globalization and political anthropology perspective. Okay, so in materialistic terms, I would say where the money is, where the power is produced. At the same time, it is crucial to decenter the gaze, not only, to decenter the gaze, being in the center of production and having this posture as of professional stranger, but also to open up and to see that actually many things are going on differently and in different ways all over the world, and far from those hypothetical center and symbolic center. And this is not only in fashion, this is in general. I mean, this is something that we need to do and is crucial to do in our relation with nature, with bodies, with gender, with everything. And I do think that is crucial to open up and to see what's going on, and actually things are going on differently, not from now. And we have to open it, but we have to, again, to put them in conversation with the big boss, big power.
Yeah,
I don't know if I answer to your
yes, absolutely. So I think this points towards future research in a way, and maybe as a final point, you can. You mentioned also the materiality as looking at the actual makers of fashion. Maybe you can, as a final point, say something about future research.
Of course, yes. Actually, I have many different points of research that I am now involved in, because my idea, I mean, it's just a starting point, as I said, and I would love to cover not only alone, but with global research, with other research, because research is also a collective process. We do not work alone, never, and this is very important to say. I would like to really connect the materiality of the production of, let's say, a luxury garment from the raw material until the upcycling and the recycling, and to see, this is the project I'm working on now, to see all the form of labor, of value that are produced, destroyed, and reproduced, all the circulation, and to really connect, because this also a form to decolonize from the perspective, Western perspective we are in which immaterial work is valuable and material work is not. So it is very important to address this question of the articulation between the materiality and the immateriality, and to be more concrete, also to build a new cartography of exploitation, because actually we have extreme form of exploitation also in Europe. For example, now I want to work on the production of luxury item in the south of Italy, where I come from, where you have actually female worker at home that are producing luxury clothes from paid 2 euros for 1 hour, with no social insurance. And this is, I mean, I will not mention the brand, but the brand who are producing those garments in those way are the dream. Okay, so it is very important to show that this kind of exploitation, material exploitation, exists here, as well as that we have a new creative global elite which is proposing new things in India, in Pakistan, in Africa, in Brazil, in Mexico, and to stop with this colonial division in which we have Western places producing ideas, novelty, and then the global South, which is the place in which we extract material and labor forces. it's not like that. It's pretty much more complicated, and we have to re-articulate all of them in order to change it.
Thank you so much. I think
Thank you very
it's a very
much.
important book that you've written, and hopefully it's part of an inspiration for more collective action to change. So I'm looking forward to future research. So I'd like to ask you all again to open your microphones for a round of applause to thank Giulia for this evening.